Obviously, the objectives when it comes to feeding these goals, you may or may not have heard of SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. Can you really control everything necessary? Well, rarely. Can your strategy influence the outcome? More than likely. Nothing's off the table when it comes to these objectives. There was a rating agency call that I was involved in where one of the things that they were talking about was median income in the area, in the entity. I was relaying some information back to the mayor at the time, and his comment to me, not Mayor Morrow, but the comment at the time was, how do I impact that? How do I impact median income? Because I have very little to do with that. Well, think about it. You've got incentives in place that say, well, one of my goals, one of my targets can be high income opportunities for residents. That could be one of the ways that you influence the attraction of some of those jobs, is high income or high wage jobs. There's certain policy decisions that you can make to have that impact on or influence the outcome itself. Develop strategies to meet goals and objectives. It needs to be the most powerful approach available. So what are you going to get the biggest short terms, the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to, say, infrastructure? The length of that life of that infrastructure could matter depending on the programs you put in place. And then consider the impact of the strategy and the goals. Does it enhance or does it limit those goals? And then from a department's perspective, diving down into a development of activities to create an action plan. This is where the programs really come in place, assigning that responsibility for the program itself after we understand what the goals and objectives look like. Who's responsible for delivering those results? What's the time frame look like? One of the things you're going to need to understand is when you set those goals, what's the time frame of achievement? So in 12 months, how do we know we're getting there? As you revisit a lot of this information. Cost out the plan. It doesn't need to be very detailed. It needs to encompass what are the approximate costs involved of either infrastructure or public safety programs as we move forward. And then obviously prioritizing the steps, the action steps to be taken. And then being prepared to commit to the resources. One of the entities that we worked with talked about branding as an issue, and really customer service. It came down to customer service and being able to respond to a citizen. They knew that they had a decentralized information system of individuals, a network of individuals. We got together with staff, and one of the priorities ended up being able to respond to a citizen in a request in a manner that they have their question answered. Well, those resources needed to be pooled at some level, at some length, to be able to respond to them, whether there were PIOs in other areas, information officers in other areas, or just simply staff that wanted to take on that role. That was a discussion they continue to have, is how do you achieve those goals? And what do the commitments look like? Obviously, when you take away from one area, it's going to create a gap. So how do you fill that gap itself? Keys to successful strategic planning. It needs to be a priority of the executives, not just the elected officials, but also the city manager and the directors. 100% buy-in is obviously a great place to start. Somebody internally to lead the process day to day, to live it, to breathe it. And this can be staff that exists right now. It could be new staff, a new FTE that's been added. Obviously, the department directors, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. One of the keys here is, like I said before, infrastructure. Having those external boards that relate to your city involved in the process, so everybody's on the same page. And then obviously involve both the good heads and the right heads. Using the plan, once you've got the strategic plan established, make it known. understand what that strategic plan is, integrate it with the budget and other planning documents, it's a living document, so make it a living document, make employees aware of it. Again, the length of it matters. Graphical displays, make sure people understand. At the firm that I work with, our department actually has one card. It's a 8.5 by 11 card that has our priorities on one side, how we're going to achieve them on the other. It's laminated, and we give it out to everybody. That way you have it. You have it right in front of you. It's just that simple. It's a graphical display of what our goals are. And everybody's expected, obviously, to know them because you can carry that card with you. Feedback and discussion is obviously a big part of the culture. The feedback loop. After we make the decision, how do we know we're getting there? If we see something in the environmental analysis pop up and say we can't get there, how do we react to that? Well, we got to take it back to council. A new decision needs to be made, or we just need to make them aware of what's going on. And it's a regular, continuous improvement process. And that's really the budget process. It's a continuous improvement discussion, a continuous discussion that talks about improvement, talks about those goals and how we're going to achieve those goals. When we look at goals or entities that really don't live with a strategic plan, we're talking about the left-hand side. It more resembles a golf course than it does any kind of structure. The dots being the activities that meet those goals, and there's kind of nebulous shapes on the goals themselves that nothing really relates to each other. The focus is on a department by department. You have silos that exist. I need to protect what I've got in order to survive another day. There's no coordination amongst entities, much less departments. And then obviously the lack of defined goals. People don't really understand, people both external and internal don't really understand what's in your head as far as what those goals that need to be achieved within that budget document. On the right-hand side, we're talking about goals that are set, they're very clear, they look nice, they mean something, they're shaped, they're aligned. They're aligned with the resources, they're aligned with the people and the programs that you have within the city. So just kind of a revisit on, and I've got a little bit of time here, but just to revisit this, Fort Collins priorities. When we talk about goals, we're talking about high-level goals. We're talking about objectives that are your objectives. One of the phrases I like to use is, as you're driving down the street, what do you want the city to look like? What do you want that perception to be? Because more times than not, others will have that same perception. Why do you want people to get off of I-35 and come to Gardner? Whether they're from Wichita or Des Moines, Iowa. What makes that a community presence? What makes that priority happen? Here, it's about economic health within Fort Collins, environmental health, neighborhood quality, safer community. These are their higher level goals. So as we move forward, what I'd like to do is ask you to fill out, and I think it's at your desk, a piece of paper that talks about 3 strategic priorities. And this is key here. What 3 strategic priorities, 3, do you see for the community? What are your 3 strategic priorities you see for the community? We looked at Fort Collins, high level, economic health, neighborhood quality. It can be specific down into neighborhoods, but we're talking about an external feel. So what is that external perspective that you would have? What are those 3 priorities? There's a lot of this similar. Economic health relates to what Mesa County said, and I could turn it back to that too if you'd like. But nobody's going to hold this to you. What I'd really like to do is get back from you what thoughts, kind of a top of the head thought as far as those outcomes or those goals look like. Obviously, it's a little unfair because we're not in a retreat, we're not in a facilitated workshop, which means that it would be thought out all the way to the nth degree. We're really talking about here is if you're going to attack any kind of problem, what goal do you have? What goal, or define that problem? What's the goal that you would have as a city council member?